And speaking of Joel Embiid,
He put his hands on a journalist, so you can't establish a precedent where that goes with impunity, no matter how gratuitous. And I appreciated Jamel's perspective on this, and Bomani did some stuff on there. It felt extra gratuitous. So I understand Joel Embiid having a problem with it, having not been privy to that locker room and what is the general understanding is as to what third rail topics are regarding that player. But he certainly took offense, but you can't be putting your hands on somebody.
A 3-game suspension doesn't sound as bad. Like, they could give him the exact same punishment and phrase it differently. It's $1 million fine is what he got, which sounds a lot more extreme than a 3-game suspension because his salary, the 3 games, is going to be over $1 million. And by the way, and like, I don't want to poke the bear here, but like, probably going to play those 3 games anyway. So like, the suspension is not really a punishment. It's the $1 million fine that he's getting. And if I wouldn't have suspended him the 3 games. I would have said like, hey, you got $1 million fine for, putting your hands on a journalist. And then I think that adds to the severity of it, and you kind of send the message.
You should make him play the 3 games. That adds to the severity of it. But
that should be the punishment.
Get a little calf strain. Here's 3 games.
I love that.
Enjoy your calf strain.
Exactly.
You have to play.
Put it on the poll. Should Joel Embiid's punishment be that he has to play the 3 games?
Because that will quickly turn into 15 games.
Yeah, and 48 minutes each night, by the way. But in all seriousness, I think the degree of the altercation matters. Now, I don't. Is there a video of it? Because I haven't seen it.
There hasn't been video.
Oh, if there were video, it would be all the worse. Because generally speaking, when we see athletes put their hands on anybody, or when we see video of anything that you've read about tends to get worse.
I mean, that guy, though, he's 7 feet tall, and he's putting his hands on a reporter.
But I do think there's a difference, though, between somebody, poking me with an index finger and somebody shoving me where I lose my balance.
It was reported as shoving no punch. Shoving no punch is how it was reported.
I'm with my dad, though. Like, was it a poke in the why?
It's a big
why'd
difference.
you bring that in there? Because if that's what it was, I'm kind of with you.
Because I don't know.
I don't think of a shove with a finger.
Can you shove someone with a finger? Yeah.
Well, you can, but I don't think. Well, if Joel
finger.
does it to a reporter with a finger, the reporter probably moves off his stance, right?
Physically off of his stance, or off of his
if he did it to a teammate, well, off his stance is what I'm talking about.
Joel Embiid is very strong, yes, but I don't think we're talking about a finger here. A single finger.
Maybe 2.
What about 2?
2 fingers can do
like a solid.
Have you not
index
seen,
middle?
Have you not seen Joel Embiid play? If you lay a finger on him, he goes flying. So he knows exactly how powerful that can be.
The idea that it would be over the line, I don't believe is up for dispute, but I also believe the line on cruelty has just generally moved, right? So while Bomani and Jamel are longing for a different time and whatever it is locker room decorum, I don't know that Joel Embiid or the league is making any distinction between this is a reporter from a serious newspaper outlet that has mainstream credibility, or this is a blogger who says mean things about me, who also has locker room access on certain occasions under a different set of media rules as to what's allowed in the locker room. I know this has been a very difficult thing for old school public relations people to handle in a new changing journalistic market.
Who?
Well, who is who and what's allowed on decorum and decency, because the journalism standard, has always been you don't do this particular personal thing to a Joel Embiid unless you're like Skip Bayless or Jay Mariotti, who doesn't actually then go into the locker room after doing that, so doesn't risk the confrontation, because that used to be something that journalists had to go in there and account for what it is that they had written.
Give the person credit for going in there. I mean,
but
terrible column.
There are a lot of people, the way that the discourse around this has hardened, it's not just First Take, it's not just sports radio. The internet is cruel.
Yeah.
The line has moved on what is the common decency that Joel Embiid deserves to be treated with. You're not a traditional journalist. You come from a front office, old-timey front office place where this would have never happened.
What's this that would have never happened?
That the columnist wouldn't write this about the family, and then what would happen after that would not be the reporter putting the hands on the columnist.
So let's start with the columnist, Marcus Hayes. He's not a young puppy. This guy has been in that market for a long time. You mentioned Jay Mariotti. You mentioned Skip Bayless. Peter Vesey would be another one. There have been these columnists since the beginning of time. Guys who were rabble-rousers, a little bit prickly, a little poking, and crossing lines at times. You mentioned those guys wouldn't have been in the locker room afterwards. As I understand it, because Joel was so upset by this, Sixers PR, I think, did the right thing there and say, hey, let's get these people together and clear this out. Because afterward, he wrote another column, by the way, where and I don't know if you guys talked about this with Jamel. First of all, the line where he said all that stuff, he had removed it because of the public backlash. Well before seeing Embiid in that locker room. Because of the public backlash, he removed that line, that lead out of his column. So then he wrote another one a few days later saying that Embiid let the city down. And that's where Embiid in the press conference says this Marcus whoever guy talking about let the city down, and he starts listing all the injuries and all that stuff. So clearly this thing with Marcus Hayes had bothered Embiid. PR had sought to bring them together. I don't think it was meant to be in the locker room. I think the guy went into the locker room not expecting to see Embiid. And Embiid starts yelling at him about stuff. And like Jamel said, that's normal, dude. Every person I know who's been a beat writer or a columnist has had that experience of an athlete yelling at them, right? So it seems like Embiid just wanted to get it off his chest. The line that seemed to set it off to cross over from just yelling at him to shoving him was Embiid saying, I don't care about reporters say anyway. And Marcus Hayes, in a moment where he could have diffused the situation.
Clearly you do care.
And by the way, hell of a line. Look, hey, man.
Yeah, good line.
It's a great line, and it's because it's true. It's true. We wouldn't be here if you didn't care what reporters say. Not saying that what Marcus wrote was appropriate or that Joel was wrong to be angered or upset by it. I'm just saying you can't then say, I don't care what anyone says, because if you didn't care, I wouldn't even be here. So Marcus
But that's
said,
what got him shoved.
That's the escalation, yes. That's what got him shoved. I don't think Embiid had the idea that when I see this dude, I'm going to smack him or anything like that. I don't think he had that thought in his head. But you're already upset. It's heightened. And then this dude basically taunts you. At that point, he kind of lost control.
I think two things are worth noting. One, if you're a columnist, this is not bad for business, being on the end of an
Zion shoe
altercation.
situation.
Oh,
This
man.
is not
Certainly.
bad for business.
If he continues covering that team in that locker room and doesn't turn this into something else, isn't it bad for business? Because
It depends on how he handles
Greg,
it.
Hear Greg out. Hold
Greg,
on a second.
I will hear him out, but the currency can't be so cheap that
Dog.
it doesn't matter how you get the attention. All that matters is you get the attention.
It's that cheap these days.
But my
Dan.
immediate rebuttal is, hasn't he just made his job a lot more difficult
Yes,
on
he
himself?
has. But the controversy is not a bad thing if you're a columnist. Okay, it can be good for business, good for the brand, depending on what you want your brand to be. The other point I would make is that nowadays, where the old school journalist is less and less, and the quasi journalist, the blogger, whatever, who's there, he might love this. He might want to instigate it. It is good for some business.
Okay.
If you're the guy who is getting the viral story because of this.
Okay, but so may I, though? Do you guys not understand how this becomes provocative for the sake of provoking? Like how it is that it's just gratuitous if this is how we're going to do it. And don't make it just some blogger. Let's make it, there's all sorts of new media out there, all sorts of new media doing it well in a democratic meritocracy landscape. I'm happy that all sorts of new media is allowed in the locker room, but there has to be a standard on, you can't just go in there to provoke someone so that you can get the provoking reaction, and then that's good for business. That's not a good way for anybody to do this.
Dan, you keep saying new media. This guy's not new media.
I know, but I'm just talking about a lowered. Yeah, forgive me.
Okay.
He's reacting to an old-time columnist, but I'm reacting to a general reduction of a standard that now involves players pushing journalists when that's not what it used to be. That's awfully rare. An athlete putting their hands on a journalist.
Sure, yes, that's rare. Sorry, Greg. That's rare. Of course, crossing that line is rare. But when like we have to take into account the facts. The facts is this guy was legacy media, Philadelphia Inquirer, the number one paper. This guy's a columnist, and a columnist who's been writing for a very long time. I just told Mike he was writing articles like this about Allen Iverson. So this isn't like, hey, oh, this is where the media is going. People are being rabble-rousers. Let me try my hand at this. This is a guy who's, like I said, the Jay Mariotti, the Skip Bayless, the Peter Vesey provocateur role is not something new to this guy, right? The question is, what is the impact, right? Because the impact, I talked about this on Vinny Goodwill's podcast, right? The impact is this, the polarization of media, where it's either, hey, I'm going to be a provocateur and talk and get a rise out of people, and Greg's right, it pays the bills. It absolutely, that's your brand, it pays the bills.
He's right. I mean, but this, forgive me, because this is the part where it is that I'm objecting. You're right that this is old media, but do you realize that what Greg is voicing there, it's the only way for old media to keep up? Like
to stay relevant.
If the standard that he's describing is the columnist has to provoke, that's good for business. It's all that's left for the columnist that we've reduced the standard so much.
Not to put words in Greg's mouth, but Greg said if it's good for the brand. That guy's brand, yes. If you're a different columnist, not so much. But the problem is the polarization, because on the one hand, you got this. On the other hand, you've got glad-handing, everything is awesome, you're the best ever, oh, nothing wrong. Oh, like it's the chuckle fest, right? It is, and so not objective in any way. Nothing's wrong, nothing to see here. And so these are the two kind of see a lot, especially for younger media people, right? The old guard or whatever, but the people who are breaking in, they're either, I got to talk shit and get a reaction, or I got to be everybody's friend and it's not his fault. And there's just a void of just objective reporting, objective opinion work. And when it does happen, oftentimes it's misconstrued by these subjects that, oh, it's another provocateur. Like, no, sometimes they're saying something that's actually true.
I need to make clear that the column in this case provoked Embiid because it referred to a brother who had passed away, right? Joel Embiid
and his son. He made it personal by bringing family into it.
Okay, and that's a line that was crossed, and that is something that something has to be sacrosanct. And for me, I'm never going to write a critical column on an athlete that uses as some sort of an excuse the fact that he has been through this personal tragedy.
I'm going to let this go after this, but I want to ask you guys as it relates to where it is that we draw these lines. It's subjective for everyone, and I would say in the coarsening of the general discourse and where it is that the athlete has less humanity than he used to have, even as perhaps young fawning media applauds Joel Embiid and he's grown up in a different sort of social media age where he gets the extremes. It's either calling him all sorts of names or just universal "you're famous" applause because he is a social media athlete. He enjoys the villainy. He's been uncommonly comfortable sort of going back and forth with people because he doesn't mind going into Madison Square Garden as a villain. The thing that I'm finding strangest about this is go ahead and tell me all the other times you guys have. You'll be able to find certain examples, but you won't have many, of an athlete putting their hands on a journalist and getting $1 million fine because they physically handled a journalist.
Jim Rome, Chris Everett. He kept going, Chris Everett. That's one of the most. He did it on TV. It wasn't even where their cameras rolling. We were on television. We were watching it, and it happened. So that's the number one example.
Helped his career. I mean, big time.
Absolutely, because, again, that was his brand.
Yep.
Dan, I think the more concerning thing to me is the number of people who are saying, I can't believe Joel Embiid got punished. I'm like, what? Like, even Joel said, as he's yelling at this dude, I don't care what the consequences are. Meaning, if I cross that line, I do it willingly and full knowledge of what's going to happen to me. And for people to say after that, I don't think he should have got suspended or anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's the part where people see like a carte blanche. Well, he said something about his brother. That's not an acceptable response. Violence is not an acceptable response other than violence being beget upon you.
But that's not for you to decide. That's for Joel Embiid to decide.
No.
I mean,
no, violence is not.
No, he said, I'm willing to take the fine. I'm willing to
That's
take the
my
penalty. I'm going to push this guy.
Stugotz, we're speaking the same language. Yes, you're right. I'm going to take the fine. I'm going to take the suspension, the penalty. I'm talking about people saying, I can't believe he got penalized.
Right.
The place that I would just stop you guys on is there shouldn't be a different standard for professionalism for Joel Embiid than there is for the journalist. It can't be good line in the locker room when you've escalated something to provoking Joel Embiid. I'm fine for both of them being held to a professional standard, but it can't be good for somebody's business and bad for somebody else's when the journalist is in there stirring up the provocation. Like, the standard of professionalism has to be the same for both of them.
Absolutely.
I agree.
But it's kind of a byproduct, right? That like Greg said, that this might be his most read column ever. It's not. I don't
I'm
believe
saying
that.
you only make it worse when you make it that. Forgive me again for putting new media in here, but when I make sports debate television that, and when I make the old columnists like Cody, how are you going to keep up with the young people? How are you going to keep up with the diminished standard on professionalism that makes it okay to provoke Joel Embiid, makes it okay to have a good line in a locker room where Joel Embiid is already emotional and escalated, and we're trafficking in dead brothers stuff? Like, it's not just provocation, it's this deeply personal a provocation.
I'm curious, Greg, what was the closest you felt like an athlete was going to put hands on you because of something that you wrote?
When I covered the Dolphins full time in the early 90s for a couple of years, there was a post-game altercation on the road somewhere. I don't even remember where it was, where a linebacker started yelling at me, and it never came to fisticuffs because the PR guy at the time was very diligent and right there. But it happens occasionally.
I'm picturing Brian Cox.
That's
terrifying.
exactly who I was thinking.
It's a possibility.
Well, you kept the name out for some reason. You didn't mention the name.
Yeah,
classy.
it's been 30 years ago. I could say a name, but I would only be about 80% sure I was right.
You forgot.
But
Hold
the
on.
point is, it happened.
Logan Roy almost hit him?
You forgot the name of who it was?
Yeah, it's not that uncommon.
30 years ago.
Did he have the neck guard on during the altercation?
Were you ready to go? Like what? Like
You said
had
it
gotten
didn't come to fisticuffs.
But had it come to
It wouldn't have been your
Were
fisticuffs.
you saying
it
hold
was
me
a
back?
yelling. It was a
How do you
loud.
know?
You're like,
altercation.
hold me
Young
back.
Greg Cody.
How
Did
happened?
you yell back?
Look, in this case, if Marcus Hayes shoves Joel Embiid, Marcus Hayes' employer is going to suspend him. Okay? There was an Indianapolis reporter who got into a cheeky exchange with Caitlin Clark. He was suspended for a short time and then banned from covering that team for a short time. There are consequences on both sides, and you're entirely right. It can't just be the athlete who's penalized. The journalist has to be held to his standard as well.
Fisticuffs involve the fists of you and others, right? When you describe something as fisticuffs, it means that the linebacker was involving his fists and your fists,
No.
correct?
I've got Hal Habib holding my dad back.
If I use fisticuffs, I misspoke. It was him yelling at me.
Okay,
Right.
but
But
only
you felt like it was close.
Did anyone have
I
to
mean,
step in?
only he. Yes, he says that, but
Did
only
you take a step forward?
No, I don't remember.
Neutral? Like you
you
just
did.
didn't move?
he
Greg,
doesn't remember
You
the
can't remember the
linebacker.
name.
Greg, listen to me. It's 30 years later. You said, I stepped up.
Yeah.
I stepped
Right.
up and said, go ahead. I'll
Yes.
even let you get the first shot.
I dared him. Yeah.
I think, can you look this up? I believe that I've had asked this question before, that Will McDonough in the Patriots locker room did hit a defensive back and left him crumpled in a clothing hamper.
You have to cut that guy right after, right?
I'm pretty
I mean,
sure you can find me the details of the fight where the reporter actually won the fight in the Patriots locker room.
I'm going to text Ryan McDonough right now, and I'm going to ask him, did your dad punch a linebacker in a locker
A
room?
defensive back. I believe.
1979, he did indeed do it. It was Raymond Claiborne.
Wow.
So Greg Cody can't remember. Will McDonough certainly remembers that from 1979.
Will
Greg-
McDonough's not with us anymore.
The late Will McDonough. I get $50 from somebody
it's a
for keeping
$50
him
fine.
alive, even though he's dead. No, I get.
Is that how we're doing it now?
I
Really?
like that,
I mean,
yes.
you're
Abraham
keeping
Lincoln.
him alive. I mean,
But in that locker room in 1979, Will McDonough remembered when he was alive punching Raymond Claiborne. Greg Cody does not remember the linebacker. I remember when a physical confrontation in a locker room scared me. I remember the participants. I shouldn't have been laughing. I remember all the details of being in a Denver Broncos locker, in the Denver Broncos Dolphin locker room at a Broncos game in Denver, because I was that scared of laughing at an inappropriate time, and O.J. McDuffie was furious about it.
Wow. Wait, okay, so give us details. Give us context.
No, I
here.
was just scared because he was escalated, and I did think it was going to escalate to him being physical, not me being physical.
Fisticuffs? Or?
No, fisticuffs have to involve both parties. I don't think it's fisticuffs if it's only one person's fists.
So he was yelling at you
Yes.
for something that you wrote.
For laughing in the locker room after a loss.
Oh, that's it? You walked in the locker room, they lost, they're morose. You had a chuckle, and he was like, how dare you laugh in here?
Well, he was mad about other things I'd also written.
Stacking.
But yes, that was the moment that got him angriest, is that in the middle of how much they cared, I was being careless.
Yeah, you don't do that.
Dan, you know what you were missing right there? A great line like Marcus Hayes. If you had one of those, mwah.
Yeah.
I believe I was also mouthy in that circumstance.
Oh,
really?
Okay, what'd you say? What
More
was your
than a
line?
chuckle.
Wow.
I don't remember the line, but I shouldn't have.
What are you, Greg Cody? I mean-
I wasn't happy with him telling me how to behave in his locker room.
Now, in fairness to Will McDonough, Claiborne had this coming because Claiborne poked Will McDonough in the eye first.
One finger or two.
And then he leveled him.
And-
One. I believe it was one. An index finger. Yeah.
Should've done this move.
And he was snapping and bumping into a bunch of writers. So Will McDonough kind of was just like, hey, there's no need for that. And then he got poked in the face, and he reacted through 2 punches, and he ended up in a laundry cart.
Stanley Morgan.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Dan,
Great receiver, by
That's
the
a
way.
great one.
Yeah.
when you say you were mouthy, did you say something along the lines of, he says, hey, stop laughing. Like, hey, I didn't get my ass beat out there. Did you say something like that?
I don't think it was. I don't remember the details. I just claim that I remembered all of the details
How
while
many
not
fights are you guys
remembering-
getting into that you don't remember the details of athletes getting into fights with you?
I didn't remember my retort. I'm remembering who was mad and why he was mad. And it was not somebody that I wish to be trifling with, because I've told the story before. When he was fighting with 320-pound Daryl Gardner, who nobody fought with, he went to his car to go get a gun in the practice facility parking lot. Well, it's not someone I wanted angry at me.
To be fair, Dan, they were on the road, so I don't think he could have gotten a gun.
Thank you for that fairness.
It was important.
Not how I was
Depends on
thinking
the
at the
state.
time.
But that's
It
right.
does.
John Morant had his gun in Denver. That's right. Never mind, Dan. You did the right thing.
You guys made the one finger push of Joel Embiid a shove, but the one finger poke of Raymond Claiborne a Three Stooges
To the
move.
eye is totally different, man. It is. I mean,
you
it hurts.
guys-
You don't poke the eye.
You
You
guys
poke the
made it
shoulder.
a Three Stooges move of poking him in the eye.
Roddy Piper would do it with a thumb, and it'd be it would stage his comeback. He'd initiate tons of offense off of that one move.
Do you flop if you get poked by Joel Embiid?
1,000%. What do
Right?
you
Of
think?
course, yes.
Early
With-
retirement.
I show up the next day to the practice facility with one of
Neck
those neck
brace,
braces.
yeah.
and
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
same.
And a lawyer.
I'm with you.
Yep.